Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. We are back with the inventory show, Weekend Watches. We are starting off our Sunday with the Grand Seiko Skyflake, launched in 2019. This is a watch that caused me to fall instantly in love, and not just because I discovered it on an overseas trip at the Dubai airport, which is a lot like a mall. Well, this watch struck me because it takes what everyone loved about the SBGA407 snowflake dial, and it added a much needed addition of color. And the color gives this a sportier feel and a more casual feel, even though it's now in the more traditional heritage style 1960s inspired case. It's not a big watch at 40.2 millimeters in diameter, and this is an unusual version of it because almost every other time I've seen this watch, it's been on a strap. It is 100 meters water resistant, which means on this factory bracelet, you now have the option of swimming with this watch, which goes a long way towards making it a viable all-arounder. Single fold deployment clasp, you can see we've got a bracelet using a intermediate size link on both sides in case you find yourself in between sizes. We've got a Seiko 9R65 on the back, and I'll do my best to show you some of the highlights here. Taking a quick look, you look very carefully, you can see one pawl and the pawl wheel of the magic lever winding system and the lovely little forged click for the ratchet wheel atop the barrel. The movement's nicely decorated, though like most mainstream luxury watches, the movement is machine finished. What sets this apart is the spring drive technology, which is a spring driving a gear train that turns this unidirectional governing wheel. That creates an induced electrical current that activates a quartz oscillator that uses magnetic braking to slow down the governing wheel. The governing wheel is then directly geared to the hands at the center of the dial. The seconds, the minutes, and the hours. And what really strikes us here is that the completely smooth sweep of the seconds hand is exactly what it appears to be. It's not an ultra-high frequency system like you see on some mechanical and quartz watches that look like they're sweeping. This is a true sweep. And because this is only driven by the spring, there are no batteries, no capacitors, no stepper motors. The dial features here, you can see how they're faceted blade-like and mirrored. All those pieces are made by hand and then placed by hand, making this an extraordinarily handmade watch. The dial, with that snowflake texture inspired by the snowdrifts outside of the Shiojiri studio that creates these, that dial creates a headache for its maker in the form of 80 distinct steps in its fabrication. Now, spring drive is accurate to plus or minus 15 seconds a month, so you have mechanical sole but quartz precision. The blued hand is actually fired blued steel, and then you've got a power reserve indicator for the automatic winding 72-hour power reserve. For the watch on the wrist, it's really easy to wear. It's only about 46.5 millimeters lug to lug, and it's reasonably thin with a sloped case flank, so you can easily wear it on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist or smaller. The case, of course, being tin plate polished, is manually finished to a mirror shine. For under 10 grand, this is an extensively handmade watch. All right, we're going to jump into something that's even more upscale, but we're going to stick with the blue dial and the full integrated steel bracelet look. Now, this is much more integrated than what you saw on the SBGA407. That featured a conforming end link. This is literally bracelet into lug into case. Launched in 2023 by H. Moser & C. This is the Streamliner Blue Enamel, and it's a very special watch. It's the smallest and most compact of the Streamliners yet. 11.2 millimeters thick, 45 millimeters if you measure the first link to the opposite number on the other side, 45 millimeters across the wrist, 39 millimeters in diameter. This is the first Streamliner that can really be worn on smaller wrists and also by both men and women. But what sets it apart is the use of blue enamel over a hammered style solid gold dial. The dial is white gold. The enamel is translucent and smoked, and this is what Moser calls aqua blue. The aqua blue is stunning. Turn out the lights. We have ceramic-based global light lume. And then we have a screw-down crown, 120 meter water resistance, an intricately finished and manufactured, almost organic-looking bracelet. And then in profile, relieved sides with raised polished lip to the bezel and the case back. We've got a full deployment clasp here, double folding. And on the back, this movement was a debut for Moser last year. It is the HMC 500. So a platinum micro rotor energizing a 74-hour power reserve. The blackened bridges feature double-crested Moser stripes, and you can see that they are partially skeletonized, particularly the terminal end of the train, where you have the great wheel, third wheel, fourth wheel, and escape wheel. Moser making the balance, the hairspring, and the escapement here. It does have a hacking seconds function, and you can see that the rotor itself has been triple finished. Black polished screws, media blasted base plate, magic lever style bidirectional winding system, solarization on the ratchet wheel atop the barrel. It's a really good looking movement. We'll do a loom shot and a wrist shot simultaneously. Let me see if I can pull this off. You can see, easy to consult. Interesting use of a small seconds on a sports watch too. You don't see that too often. Taking a look, you can see how much clearance I have on each side of the case, nowhere near the edge of my wrist. So I can recommend this for a 13.5 to 14 centimeter circumference wrist, and it fairly easily fits under a cuff. This might be the most exciting watch Moser has launched since the Streamliner bowed back in 2020. This is the Streamliner for everyone. Enamel, solid gold dial, an exciting new movement, and a universally wearable size. Now we're going to stick with our full bracelet theme, but now we're going to go even further upscale. Back in 2021, Audemars Piguet launched its first ever smoked dial Royal Oak Jumbo. And in 2022, it launched it in a new reference. This is the 16202 in platinum with a sunburst metallic smoked green dial. This watch was only available for 1 year. The 16202 with the 50th anniversary rotor, only available in 2022 for the anniversary of the Royal Oak. Now this is a full platinum watch. The bracelet extravagantly and excruciatingly detailed by hand. This watch feels like $1 million. The weight is incredible. You can also see that it is well loomed and quite practical. It's designed to be worn daily. This watch was only available through AP houses, which are a sort of combination factory-owned boutique and clubhouse. And there are far fewer of those than there are AP boutiques. Rolling around, you can see that the bracelet, every single piece is intricately detailed. Removable links fixed by screws. One feature that's new for 2022, the addition of a proper quick set for the date. Previously, the Jumbo did not have one. The watch is 39 millimeters in diameter, 8.2 millimeters thick, and you can see on the reverse side, the new caliber 7121 is much bigger than the old 2121, so it better fills the case back. And we have an interesting symmetry. We have this large bridge for the solarized barrel. The barrel features a combination of solarization and snailing. And then symmetrically, on the opposite side of the movement, we have a full balance bridge with a free-sprung balance. We have a feature that I've only previously seen on vintage American E. Howard pocket watches, which is that we have a separate stud holder that's a little bridge that attaches separately to the movement. So it's very easy to locate the stud and also keep it fixed relative to the balance, the roller jewel on the balance, and avoid warping the hairspring when you are installing the balance. Now it's a 4 hertz beat rate compared to the previous 2.75 hertz. It now has a 55-hour power reserve rather than the old 40-hour. And you can see that the rotor is extravagantly finished, skeletonized and internally beveled to create, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 interior angles, just that I can count casually and quickly. There are 3 different types of finish on this white gold rotor, and it is a work of art in its own right, only available for the 50th anniversary year of the Royal Oak. So that was just for 2022. Now we're going to put this watch on my wrist, and you can see that it's a large piece for a 39. Every Royal Oak on a full bracelet wears a little bit bigger than its rated size. So while this is a 39, think of it as more of a 40 or a 41. At 8.2 millimeters, though, it is super flat and flush. And I would describe this watch condition-wise as a 97 out of 100. You're getting the full AP house experience with this one. And again, just the weight of it is incredible in full platinum. Sticking with Holy Trinity, but now a dress watch approach. Here we have a model that represents an outstanding 2019 evolution of the Patrimony Perpetual calendar ultra thin. Here it is in 5N red gold with a metallic blue sunburst dial, still a perpetual calendar, and only 9.3 millimeters thick. You can see the lugs are welded on the old-fashioned way, laborious, slow-going manual case construction. And then on the dial side, we have the perpetual calendar with the day, the date, leap year and month, and then the moon phase. No need to correct this calendar until the year 2100. Turn it all over, and you can see we have the legendary Vacheron 1120. It's the 1120/3QP, and of course it's based on the famed JLC 920 of Bausch, created in 1967 by JLC on commission from the Holy Trinity, and only ever used by the Holy Trinity. It was never used in another JLC client brand, and it was never used by JLC. So we have a skeletonized rotor, beautifully decorated with the Maltese cross motif. You can see all the beveling on all of the interior flanks of this rotor. A 22 karat mass, not 21, not 18. 5-position chronometer style adjustment, solarization on crown wheel core and ratchet wheel, as well as the reduction wheels of the winding system. The bevels are something else. As you can see, a mile wide, broad, mirrored, and rounded, finished the old-fashioned way. Aggressively shaded stripes laid down by abrasive wheel across the bridges. You could see the beveling inside all of the jewel and screw sinks, engine turning on the base plate, in several sizes, by the way. And then also black polished screw heads with chamfered slots and circumference. Free-sprung Gyromax style balance, beating away at 19,800 vibrations per hour. And if you look carefully, you can see even the winding click here has been satinated and beveled. Many little works of art inside here. 40 hours power reserve again, and a perpetual calendar. The entire movement with the perpetual calendar still only 4.31 millimeters thick, a testament to how slender this movement was when it was created by JLC back in the late 60s. We have a beryllium ring that runs all the way around the movement, and it sits on 4 ruby roller jewels with constant contact, so that close-hauled rotor and mass can never contact the bridges or the base plate. A really nice watch, a fairly large dress watch, I'll say that. It's not tiny, it's not broad lug to lug, and not as much as you would expect at 41 millimeters, but 41 millimeters is sizable for a dress watch, so I'm going to recommend it for a 15 centimeter circumference wrist or larger. This is as good as it gets from Vacheron, the kind of watch that made Vacheron famous. Strong lugs, beautiful balance, and elegance comparable to the best, with finish that needs no excuses, and an all-time great movement inside. Okay. So from one to another, we've got a battle of the best perpetual calendars. Audemars Piguet launched the Code 1159 Perpetual Calendar in 2019, and it was widely regarded as the one Code 1159 that they got right out of the gate. It needed no excuses, no revisions. It was beautiful, but it was also rose gold, and not everyone wants colored gold. So in 2022, Audemars Piguet gave us this, the Code 1159 Perpetual Calendar in white gold. 50 millimeters lug to lug, only 11.1 millimeters thick and 41 in diameter. There is a lot of nuance here. You can see the unusual shape of the crystal, designed to create fascinating refractions off axis, and also that the lugs are actually welded to the bezel up on top. And I don't know how well you could see this, but you can actually shove a very thin piece of paper between the lugs and the case back because they're not physically connected. We have little white gold screws and bars to fix the strap to the case, reminiscent of the screws on the Royal Oak bezel. And then we have a mid-case here that is a rounded octagon, another subtle reference to the Royal Oak. The lovely flying buttress-like evacuated lugs make the watch look a lot lighter and more graceful when you see it in person. And then you can see there's micro beveling inside those hollows. We've got a full folding clasp, which is notable since a lot of these come with pin buckles. And then we've got a dial made of aventurine glass, which is a super dark, translucent blue enamel that traces its origins to Italian jewelers in the late Renaissance period. You also have a slightly different shaded aventurine glass moon phase disc with a photorealistic moon. We've got week of the year, that's what the scale on the outside is, day, date, month, leap year, perpetual calendar, no need to touch it, as you simply don't have to adjust anything until the year 2100. Now turn it all over and you can see Audemars Piguet sharing that movement that we just saw on the Vacheron. Audemars Piguet calls it the 5134 in this application, and you can see there are some subtle differences, but for the most part, they're both based very closely on that legendary JLC 920. Differences are the rotor. Both of them are finely finished, although we could argue back and forth over which one is finer. I would argue that the Audemars Piguet is less elaborately skeletonized, but more impressively beveled, whereas the Vacheron is maybe less impressively beveled internally, but more impressively skeletonized. You can see the architecture of the Gyromax style balance and how similar it is from watch to watch. A lot of similarities here, the main differences being the Perpetual calendar modules themselves. Of course, AP using that weekly calendar system, but technically speaking, in terms of power reserve, beat rate, winding, and balance architecture, they are the same in that regard. I'm going to throw this watch on my wrist. It's a lovely thing to wear, though it is fairly large. At 50 millimeters lug to lug, it wears a bit larger than the Vacheron. The Vacheron's also considerably thinner. It's going to come down to a matter of personal taste. Now, one thing that's a bit unusual about Audemars Piguet's white gold in this era is that rather than use gray gold, which is a darker color but white all the way through, they like to rhodium plate their white gold to make it indistinguishable from platinum, and it really is. If you like your white precious metal to be ultra white, you can see how there's almost no distinction between the platinum and the white gold of the Audemars Piguet case. If you look at the screw that fixes the strap, that is actually unplated white gold, and you can see it almost looks yellow compared to the case. And if we jump over to the buckle, you can see that it too is a distinctly darker shade of white gold than the case, and it's not really close. It's obvious to see. It's a little bit of a quirk of how AP does things. Here's another example of gray gold. The original Lange und Söhne Odysseus came out in 2019, but for 2020, there was already a new model in white gold, an option equipped with a strap rather than a bracelet. The white gold model features a gray dial, more heft in the hand, and a couple of different strap options. This one's on a leather strap, but it also comes with a black rubber strap, so you get to choose which one. Now, it does a great job of hiding its quick-set system for the calendar in these crown guard style profiles. One of them is a quick set for the panorama datum. The other is a quick set for the day. So the Datamatic system, very well integrated without being obvious. 40.5 millimeters in diameter. It's about 11.5 millimeters thick. It is quite well loomed. And if you were to put it on the rubber strap, you'd be able to avail yourself of the screw down crown and the 120 meter water resistance. Again, we're talking about gray gold here, the 18 karat white gold that's white all the way through. But you can also see it's not quite as white as rhodium plated. Now, on the reverse side, we've got something fun in the form of a movement created specifically for this watch. Now, it's a version of the Lange L086 with two big changes. The first is that we have a full balance bridge rather than the 8/6's single-sided balance cock. The second is that this is the first Lange movement to employ a 4 Hz beat rate, again, in the interest of making it less shock susceptible, so that bumps and concussions won't change the timing of the watch via free-sprung architecture. Concussions won't damage or displace the wheel thanks to the full balance bridge. And thanks to the 4 Hz beat rate, there is very little similarity between the oscillations of the wrist and the oscillations of the balance. The higher the beat rate, the less those two things influence each other. And of course, it's mostly the wrist influencing the watch because of the disparity in the mass of the two objects. But the higher beat rate helps to keep better time under concussive circumstances. We have this lovely Datamatic rotor attached by blued screws to a platinum winding mass that endows this watch with 50 hours of power reserve, and it does feature stop seconds. It's fairly broad when you add the end links here, and you can see that there's a little bit of a quick release system built into the bottom, so you can easily swap between the two straps that come with this watch. Because it has a fair wingspan, I'd recommend this watch for a 15 centimeter circumference wrist or larger. You can see being fairly thin with a domed bezel, it will slip underneath the cuff, so it's got some versatility there if you want to use it as a dress watch. All right, guys, you know what that slide means. This is a minute repeater. And it's not just a minute repeater, it is International Watch Co.'s first serial production wristwatch minute repeater. The Portugueser 4240, this is a model that debuted in 1995, and it was, to be honest, it was actually IWC's second wristwatch minute repeater. There was the 3770 Grand Complication of 1990, but this is the first standalone repeater. Remember, the Grand Comp was also a perpetual calendar and a chronograph. So being built into the Portuguese platform that resurfaced during the 1993 Jubilee. This was a breakthrough model for IWC at a time when the Portugueser, not any kind of a pilot watch, was the flagship of the brand. Remember, launched in 1939 and the first purpose-built oversized dress watch, the Portugueser was only built in a few hundred copies from 1939 to 1993 when production resumed in series. So though an iconic IWC, it was always a rare IWC. 42 millimeters in rose gold here. This is a 250-piece limited edition, and you can see it has that lovely vintage International Watch Co. script. We're going to take a look at the case back. The movement is the 95290. It is a 37.8 millimeter diameter pocket watch caliber. I'm just going to start winding it here for your viewing pleasure. It is a slow beat rate, 18,000 vibrations per hour, a traditional pocket watch center wheel architecture. It does feature an enormous hacking lever right there, adjacent to the balance. The balance beats away at 5 beats per second. You can see the balance is physically huge, and the watch is adjusted in a high horology and chronometer standard 5 positions with pressed golden chaton holding the train jewels as well as the barrel arbor in place. There's also an overcoil hairspring, so the watch keeps very consistent time in different positions. Note that there's snailing on the barrel and solarization on the ratchet wheel with media blasting of all of the bevels, and you can see that there are interior angles, but the beveling is media blasted, which is an unusual pocket watch derived treatment. Stripes across the bridges, engine turning on the base plate, and of course, if you want to fire up a minute repeater, you want to make sure that you adjust it to 12:59. So you get 12 hours, 3/4, and 14 minutes after the third quarter. So I will do my best to adjust this accordingly. My right hand is injured, which is why I'm doing everything backwards here. I will try to get this precise. Throwing it on the wrist now. A quirk here is that because the minute repeater module is under the dial, you can't see it, and it forces IWC to use a longer cannon pinion and a taller hour wheel that stacks up so high to clear the module that we wind up having to use a dive watch style plexiglass to clear the handset. So that's what you're looking at there. 51 millimeters lug to lug, 42 millimeters in diameter. Remember, it's a Portugueser. It's supposed to be oversized. Originally created for the Portuguese importers of IWC, the idea was to have a wristwatch that was accurate as a pocket watch. The only way to do that was to build a purpose-built, oversized wristwatch case for IWC pocket watch caliber. And the reference 325, the first Portuguese, was born. This might be my favorite watch on today's show, but it's got competition from Glasuta. Moritz Grossmann, a famous name in German watchmaking, refounded in 2008 by Lange watchmaker Christine Hutter. They make what I consider to be the finest finished watches in the world, co-equal with maybe 2 or 3 others. This is the Moritz Grossmann Tremblage, 41 millimeters in rose gold. It came out in 2021. The dial is a solid block of German silver, and everything, the text, the track for the minutes, the seconds, the numerals, all of that is raised and relieved via engraving from the dial base. This is all a monoblock, one piece, everything you see. And they too have special hands with manually cut, polished, and fired hands. And they fire them briefly to create this lovely violet brown color. There is a brilliant setting system here. You pull the crown out, which stops the balance, and then you could set the watch as precisely as you like. And then notice the crown is already moved back into a flush position. It snaps back the second you let it go. To reactivate and re-engage the drive, watch the seconds hand. Better yet, watch the balance. When I press this release, the watch resumes operation. So instead of pushing the crown back in and risking displacement of the minute hand you've so precisely placed, you re-engage via the clutch button. Turn it all over, stunning movement. Now this movement is enormous and fills the entire case back, featuring media blasted bridges and plates with every character on the bridges hand engraved. Moritz Grossmann, Glasuta, 20 stones, number 1912, freehand engraving on the half bridge for both the escape wheel and the balance, and it is a much more intricate and detailed engraving than you get on a Lange. And you can see when you have them side by side, it's quite obvious that the Lange is done much more rapidly and doesn't have the delicacy and intricacy of the volutes and scrolling on the Moritz Grossmann. Moritz Grossmann making its own balance using an overcoil hairspring, 2.5 hertz beat rate, a unique steel rack and needle adjustment system, clear sapphires used. We have more of those violet brown fired screws, triple solarization, I should say, on the ratchet wheel, polished crown wheel core, beveling on the teeth of both wheels, a black polished click. This is as good gets. In fact, this is great. This is the living end. This is the best of the best in the realm of dress watches. Grossmann movements are deceptive because when you see them online, they look plain, almost austere. When you see them in person, you realize that you're looking at something that could deal body blows to the monopoly of Grubel Forsey on people's mind space for finishing. This is as good as anything Grubel Forsey is doing, as really as good as anything Lange & Teine, Philippe Dufour, Romain Gaultier, or other best of the best finishing brands are achieving. And again, you could see on the reverse side how superb it is, how clean the finish is, and antiseptic the movement is when you get ultra close, how broad and mirrored the bevels are, how they've satinated the edge of the bridge, how the three-quarter bridge is held up by distinct pillars. Everything here is shockingly good and imaginative and original. They've not just created beautiful finish, but also a finishing style that is all of their own, and that's something that even the best artisans often fail to achieve. Many of them work so hard on details that they fail to establish a distinct style and flair. Moritz Grossmann has that. If you love this watch, or any of these watches, reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for pricing and details.